welcome. Today's upload is a continuation of our introduction, and it's carrying on with some of the consideration of ways we think rather than questions we've asked. I'll come back to my introductions possibly in another upload, but I think in the next week I'll go to some of the actual questions you've done. Part of the reason being this particular thought piece might be a little too eggheady, and I feel a little bit, what use is this to anyone? It's also long, so you're going to have to be patient. And number one, if you think, mate, I can't be bothered, whatever, that's fine. I'll be doing some kind of upload for Sunday, so we can worship on YouTube. It'll be a bit stripped back because I'm stuck in my little world. So here goes, and I hope this is helpful. Right, so in the last session we asked, how do our Christmas trees obscure the crib? And it was an exploration of this thing they call syncretism and the ways our thought baggage might impede our view of the divine. So following on from that, I want to explore the interplay between two broad philosophical perspectives and the interplay and overlaps between them. And these areas of thought are, first of all, the concept of idols within biblical literature, and the broad movement we call the Enlightenment, which took hold in Western culture about 350 years ago. Now, before you skeptics switch off, I'd like to reassure you that I'm not going to go on some binary rant that rationalism is false and Christianity is true. As I noted in my previous session, Christianity is a bit like a child in a sweetie shop, a pick and mix sweetie shop. And we've always absorbed and integrated ways of thinking and seeing from the culture around us. And this has large elements of good. Indeed, the current Pope, for example, makes the point that religious faith should always be a friend of truth and the good wherever it is found. But for the purposes of this course, what I'm doing is interrogating the interplay between how our culture thinks and how it may both assist or infect the ways we are able to think Christianly. I'm trying to make us aware of the underpinning assumptions that might sit behind our questions, not to negate the questions, but to assist in personal reflection. So let's chat about the Enlightenment and the infusion of classical philosophy that sits at the base of most Western culture's way of seeing the world. So as we know, for around 1500 years after Christ, Christianity became the dominant worldview of Europe. It held incredible civic and social power. Then a period of time we call the Reformation happened, and names like Martin Luther, whether willing or no, became leaders in a new world order as states broke away from the religious control of Roman Catholicism. And one of the consequences of this movement was the breakdown in authority of who defines and who controls truth. And this has previously been held by the Catholic Church, and it was now in the hands of the laity, of ordinary people. Now, understandably, this erosion of thought control led to a flowering of different views, and we still see this in the profusion of different Christian denominations. But the important point for us today is that it opened the door to the idea that something other than the Church can become this source of authority and truth. This possibility became the energising principle for the slew of Enlightenment philosophies and early humanists who then followed on from about 1715 AD and onwards. Now, these were people who didn't accept the axiom that the Bible or the Church were the arbiters of truth. But where did they look for their inspiration? Well, in the main, they looked back to classical Greek philosophy. And these ideas have carried through and struck deeply into our modern culture. And, for example, some key ideas that we carry now are to live for pleasure, to avoid personal harm, not to believe anything without proof, and that existence is created out of atoms. These all come out of classical Greek philosophy. Yes, extended and developed, but that's where they start. And of course, the Enlightenment became the key to unlocking the extraordinary gifts of the scientific method and its many benefits. It's now so deeply absorbed that without any philosophical training, the average teenager is familiar with the idea that there's no need to believe anything until it's proven. What this process, this approach clearly achieved can be seen today in the extraordinary achievements of vaccinations, computers, healthcare, etc., etc. It also had another broadly positive effect of eroding the superstitious and the supernatural as viable explanations of reality. I think on the whole that's probably a good thing. Essentially I think that, for example, to narrate mental illness or addiction as the work of demons is just unhelpful. Now my point is that whether Christian or not, we all carry this philosophy deep within our thinking. Indeed, outside certain branches of fundamentalism, most Christians are quite at home with the likelihood that the world is billions of years old and that evolution is the most credible description of the life cycle that we have. And this scepticism has freed us from all sorts of silly ways of thinking and seeing, but it's not without its problems, and to explore those, I want to discuss the concept of idolatry. At a simple level, the idea of the idol, as contrasted with the God Yahweh, is described in this text I'm about to quote from Psalm 115, where it says this: "Our God is in the heavens, he does whatever he pleases. Idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. They have hands but do not feel, feet but do not walk. They make no sound in their throats. Those who make them are like them. So are all who trust in them." So let's examine some key points that emerge from that passage. Firstly, it says that Yahweh, the true God, is external to this reality. He's not part of this created order. And he has agency beyond our will or expectations. Number two, it points out that idols are the creation of people and are internal to this reality. They are stuff made by us, stuff made by stuff, I suppose you might say. And thirdly, although idols have the appearance of agency, i.e. eyes but don't see, they are blind and inactive. And finally, with the words, "those who make them are like them," we're told that we become like the thing we create and trust. Now, we must remember that Psalms are poetry and as such have both polemical and metaphorical flavours. So this passage is not a technical description of an idol and its impact on us. Nevertheless, if we strip back the poetry, what we're being told is that when we devote our full trust to something we have created, it ultimately blinds us to the fullness of reality. And in this case, the reality being noted is the God who is above and beyond the created realm. And it's worth remembering that the problem with an idol is not that somebody has made an image of a bull or a snake or whatever. The problem comes when we give that thing we've created the status of worshipping and trusting it as Lord. We don't use the word Lord very often, but what we're saying by the word Lord is that we're giving this creation of ours the function of defining our reality. And this is the key problem, because the idol therefore creates the circumstances wherein we also define other possible realities. Let me illustrate that with a metaphor. This is a bit like wearing, let's say, green tinted glasses. Now, if we never take our glasses off, we will see the world through our green tinted glasses and therefore assume, if we see it at all, that the world has a green hue. But of course, if we take off those glasses, we'll see them actually for the limitation they are on our sight. And to expand through another metaphor, let's use one to do with language. If I, for example, make an idol of speaking English, then English becomes the only way I'm able to think about the world. In doing that, I can end up discounting, for example, the meanings or insights of Japanese. Now, at its worst, therefore, if English becomes my way of speaking about reality, I can easily fall into the trap of perceiving other languages as meaningless gibberish, on the basis that that's how they sound to me. Whereas, if we take off our green-tinted glasses, we'll escape the filter that creates for our perception. And if we learn other languages, or at least learn that other languages have valid meaning, we can understand the breadth of life with the enjoyment it deserves. This is why the psalm is helpful in talking about idols. We are the ones that create the idol, the filter, the language. But the problem it creates is that it restricts rather than liberates our ability to perceive. So what's that got to do with my conversation about Enlightenment philosophy? Well, the point I'm making is that Enlightenment philosophy provides a self-created way of seeing the world, a green-tinted filter. I'm sure it works in loads of ways for understanding the physical world. But given its self-creation, it ultimately leaves us in an echo chamber of our own making that actually stops us seeing the divine. Let me explain that. If we devote ourselves to the idea that nothing is true until it can be proven in material terms, then nothing will be true or real to us unless it is something that conforms to the definition of material or events perceptible to our senses. But the point our psalm makes is that if God is real, he is supernatural, meaning above and beyond nature and not bound by a philosophical limitation on what constitutes reality. The psalmist's point is that God is in heaven and does whatever he pleases, thus alluding to God as being both beyond creation and as being unrestricted by the created order. But if we're devoted to a filter which only allows us to see and believe in things that conform to a physical definition of reality, we won't be able to see the divine hand at work, even if it's waggling in our face. And we see this at work all the time when we consider the resurrection of Jesus. So let's examine it. The bare facts relayed to us at the time is that Jesus was brutally killed, yet 3 days later a glorified form of his person was alive. Of course, modern Enlightenment skeptics would say that's not possible, so it didn't happen, and seek other rational explanations. Yet, if we take off our filtered spectacles, the resurrection stops being a problem. People reported the resurrection because the resurrection happened. Consequently, the principle of what's called Occam's razor is satisfied, being the simplest explanation is the most likely explanation. And not only that, what faithful people have attested for millennia is given room to breathe, that God is beyond creation, not bound by it. But by his grace, he sometimes steps in and waggles his divine hand in our face to let us know that we can hope for something beyond the simply material. So, what is the practical application of this essay? Here are 3 thoughts. Firstly, I'd say be aware that there is probably no such thing as a neutral or objective way of seeing the world. We all carry hidden filters. Now today I've been discussing the impact of modern Enlightenment theory on us, but there'll be others, and quite possibly ones that we think are Christian. Secondly, don't be too troubled by the questions that have no answers. Yes, we should pursue what our intellects can cope with, But we should also accept that the mysterious God is both beyond the world, yet clearly active within it. And that suggests his purposes may be a little difficult to grasp from our limited perspectives. And third, don't be troubled if someone who has no faith in God has better answers than those of us who have faith. Truth, light, reality, they're not the preserve of people of faith. And the Bible is neither scientific manual nor self-help book. And finally, may I say thank you and well done for listening this far. Thankfully, YouTube allows you to listen to this again, so if you got a bit lost, do it again. So bye-bye for now, and thank you for listening. I'll release another video this coming Sunday. Bye-bye.